Well, thank you guys so much for inviting me to come and speak to you and share my message for today. And I want to open it up with 3 readings. We have 2 from the Bible and 1 from Swedenborg. It's a little bit different than some Swedenborg passages you might be familiar with. This is a narrative. It's a story that he tells us. And so to open up, we're going to read from Isaiah chapter 3, verses 3 through 5. Many peoples will come and say, "Come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. And they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." And from the book of Luke, chapter 1, verses 5 through 20. In the time of Herod, the king of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife, Elizabeth, was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commandments and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless, because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once, when Zechariah's division was on duty, and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshipers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife, Elizabeth, will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah to turn the hearts of the parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah asked the angels, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well along in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day that this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time." Meanwhile, the people were awaiting Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. But when he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. May the Lord add his blessings to the reading and the hearing of his holy word. And now a story, a fairy tale from Swedenborg. This is from one of Swedenborg's last works, True Christianity, number 386 to 387. The third memorable occurrence. After these two angels passed out of my sight, I noticed a garden to my right. It had olive trees, fig trees, laurels and palm trees, planted in an arrangement based on their correspondences. I looked into the garden, and I saw angels and spirits walking and talking among the trees. And just then, an angelic spirit looked back at me. And here, angelic spirits is the term that he's using for people who have died, who are in the world of spirits and are being prepared to go to heaven. The angelic spirit left the garden, walked up to me, and said, "Do you want to come with me into our paradise? You will see and hear amazing things." So I went along. And the angelic spirit said to me, "The people that you see here and there were many of them, all have a love for truth and have the light of wisdom as a result. There is a magnificent building here that we call the Temple of Wisdom. Yet people are unable to see it if they believe that they have a significant amount of wisdom. They are even less able to see it if they believe that their wisdom originates in themselves. The reason for this is that people of this type lacked the love for real wisdom that would make them receptive to the light of heaven. Real wisdom consists in our seeing in the light of heaven that we know, understand, and have wisdom about is like a drop compared to the ocean of what we do not know, do not understand, and are not wise about. It is hardly anything at all. All the people in this garden paradise who acknowledge on the basis of inner perception and vision that they have relatively little wisdom can see the temple. The human mind's inner light lets people see it, but the mind's outer light without any inner light does not. I had often thought about this myself. At first, through book learning, later through my own perception, and finally because I saw it in an inner light. I had come to acknowledge that we have very little wisdom. Therefore, I was granted the ability to see the temple. It had an amazing form. It stood extremely high above the earth, square, walls made of crystal, a roof made of translucent jasper, elegantly arched, a foundation made of different types of precious stone. There were steps of polished alabaster so that people could go up into the temple. At the sides of the steps, there were images of lions with their cubs. Then I asked whether it was all right for me to go in. I was told that it was all right, so I went up the stairs. As I went in, I saw something like angel guardians flying near the ceiling, but they soon disappeared. The floor I was walking on was made of cedar with its translucent roof and walls. The whole temple was built to be a form of light. The angelic spirit came in with me. I mentioned that I had heard from the two angels about love and wisdom, and goodwill and faith. The angelic spirit said, "Did they not also mention the third element?" "What third element?" I asked. The angelic spirit answered, good, useful action, love and wisdom without good, useful action are nothing. They are only conceptual entities. They do not become real until they exist in usefulness. So today for our children's talk, I want to lead you through a little bit of a simple breathing exercise. And this is something that children can and should learn. But it's also a good way to center ourselves, get our vibe right, get our tremulations harmonized. And I think it's a good way to step into the sermon. So I'm going to invite you to take 3 deep breaths with me. And this is a technique that is an ancient Tamil breathing technique that I'm calling water bucket breathing. And what we're going to do is we're going to inhale, and you inhale very quickly, and you imagine that you're dropping a bucket down a well. And that bucket fills with water, and then you slowly pull it back up as you exhale. So you have a quick inhale and a slow exhale. And we're just going to do that 3 times. All right? Ready? Inhale. Hold it down here. 3. There you go. So, finding bliss in the temple of wisdom. Thank you all for coming to this temple of wisdom this morning. So today I would like to talk to you about humility and temples and the feeling of wonder. One of my favorite temples in India is called Chidambaram Nataraja Temple in Tamil Nadu. The name Chidambaram literally translates to the mind space. And it's said that the physical temple, older than anyone can reckon, with 40 acres of stone courtyards, sculpted rainbow towers, and its roof with 21,600 golden shingles, is only a representation of the internal mind space. This mind space is a stage, much like the one that I'm standing on. An inner emptiness that allows a place for divine choreography, the divine play, to be performed. I like this attitude. I think it applies to all sacred spaces, including our own. When you enter a temple or a church, whatever religion, that feeling of sacredness can only be made real if it is reflected in your own inner space. So Zechariah goes into the temple. Swedenborg goes into the temple, and each one of us goes into the temple. We might come to a physical church, but if we do not create a space within ourselves, God will never manifest in our consciousness. God will never really be born for us. There are 2 forms of humility: external and internal. There is a superficial kind of humility, an external humility, which inspires indulgent self-loathing and destruction. He writes soliloquies about how awful we are as if we are Hamlet. And then there's humility that's born of wonder. The ego the proprium, does not dissolve with fire or torment or loss or threat or trauma. The ego dissolves in bliss. I've struggled with navigating the paradox of humility all my life. I suspect that Swedenborg did too. What I've observed in myself and in others is that it seems like any artificial attempt to make ourselves more humble results in becoming more self-centered and narcissistic. The ego bites back at any attempt to corral it, and taking up any kind of defense against its madness seems to only make the beast stronger. It's so easy to lose a real sense of spiritual curiosity to the chains of identity as our habits and neuroses become our gods. What to do? As it is the Advent season, I want to center this sermon on our Advent story of the prophecy of the birth of John the Baptist. His father, Zechariah, this elderly priest, enters the temple to do his duties and has a vision of a divine messenger, proclaiming that he would be the father of a great prophet and holy man. His response is a perfect example of that kind of self-centering humility. In putting himself down, he centers his own inadequacy. He's so convinced of the importance of his own unworthiness that he immediately attempts to discredit God's own messenger. How can I be sure of this? He says. I'm an old man and my wife is well along in years. And for this, he is struck dumb. But here, I want you to invite you to reimagine the silence of Zechariah, not as a punishment, but as the silence of wonder. Zechariah was an intellectual, a priest well-versed in the Torah and the prophets, as well as other important scriptures and records. He was a man who knew things. He was an authority. But his son was an ecstatic. You don't think yourself into ecstasy. Bliss is something that comes through reality as it is in its most unfiltered form. Ecstasy is not a skill set. It is a knowing that cannot be measured or falsified, but it can only be directly, subjectively experienced by each one of us. It comes unlooked for in its certainty and burns away all that it touches. This is true faith. John the Baptist energy, sadhu energy, the urgency and the hunger for the direct, real, living experience of God. The prophet that makes a place for God to be born, that sets the stage. John would have been seen as a bad man. It's okay. So is Swedenborg. So am I. We have to go mad at some point. We have to go into the wilderness of our own unconscious. We have to eat bugs, wear weird clothes, experiment. We don't make way for God by learning things, filling our minds and our lives with artifacts of our religious book clubs. That may be interesting for an hour or a day, but at some point we realize it is less about seeking the temple as we would on a map than it is about realizing that we are already there. But the walls are made of clear crystal, and the word is written on our hearts. And from where we sit at the center of this incredible architecture, it seems to disappear. It's so easy to see the light shining out of other people, and it's so hard to see the light that shines through ourselves. In conversation with the story from the New Testament, we also read one of my favorite Swedenborg myths, and that's the story of his Temple of Wisdom. This temple sits in a large garden, a square building made of crystal and jasper and precious stones, materials which mirror the iconography of the New Jerusalem. This mala that I'm wearing is made of jasper. So you can picture this incredible golden roofed building with prisms shining through the clear walls. Swedenborg tells us elsewhere, that these transparent golden rainbow crystals signify in that church the word will be understood because it is translucent from its spiritual sense. So the temple of wisdom is a perceptual, internal space, represented by an architectural space. One might even call it a paradigm, a mindset. He tells us further that we are the least able to see the temple if we believe our wisdom originates in ourselves. This means our external selves, our personal doctrines and ideas about who and what we are. The part of us that sees spirituality as a practice in being the most correct, figuring out more mantras and Bible verses and magic spells and citing them all in Chicago style and presenting our knowledge at the American Academy of Religions to be politely applauded by tenured men in suits. I bet Zechariah would have loved AAR. So how do we get to the temple? I don't know. I can't tell you. I can't put the Temple of Wisdom into Google Maps. Jesus Christ couldn't tell you. Isaiah couldn't tell you. Emanuel Swedenborg couldn't tell you, because the way that leads to the temple cannot be told. No matter how true the truth, no matter how pure the messenger, love must be felt. Love must be lived to be known. Truth will not get you there. No matter how smart or clever we think we are, no matter how many books we publish or blog posts we make, or how many gurus we go chasing after, no thing can get you there if you are not there already. Swedenborg gives us a hint. He says that the human mind's inner light lets people see it, but the mind's outer light, without any inner light, does not. It's tempting to throw away truth entirely. Don't think, just act right. So you chop the wood, you carry the water, you be a good, useful new church angel. But whatever righteous behavior you think will actualize the usefulness of the influx of love and wisdom, you could save the rainforest, make up with that one relative, quit your addiction and start working out. You can accomplish whatever Herculean task of spiritual development you assign yourself. But it is not the way to the temple as long as it remains external. You might wander in that garden for all eternity, but the temple is not a reward for good behavior. The temple is you. If you blot out your senses and claim no knowledge of any apparent truth, taking up the lonely banner of an ignorant solipsism, a mindset proclaiming your mighty ignorance to the void. If we say to God's messenger, "I'm sorry, sir, but I am too old or too young, too polite, too traumatized, too disabled. I'm too much of a skeptic. I'm too much of a dreamer. I'm too apathetic or agnostic or tired. How could God possibly be right about me? How could God possibly be born from me?" Do you see how arrogant that is? Such an attitude allows the inner light to be eclipsed by our own sin. It is not the way to the temple. The way that can be walked by our own power does not lead there. The only way to the temple is silence. Not the silence of one who has been bound and gagged, their spirit crushed into submission, but the silence of wonder, the silence of the starry heavens, of a Christmas tree, of the sea and death, a blissful silence, a silent ecstasy. Could a greater humility exist? There's a blessing that I'm very fond of in Tamil that goes, Om Tirchitambalam, referencing, of course, the temple complex of the same name. It means, may your mind be a stage for the dancing feet of God. And that's some John the Baptist energy. That's some Advent energy. We do not create space for the Lord to dance into our lives by hating ourselves, by punishing ourselves, but by becoming temples of the mind's inner light. Peace, bliss, joy, equanimity. These are the qualities that allow the Lord to come into our lives. So my charge for this week in this Christmas season is to nurture the inner light. Approach the space of your own awareness as you would an altar. And just as the songs that we sing and the ideas that we share fill this physical sacred space, let's take time in our meditations to let the inner light fill our minds and hearts so that we can experience the love that flows out through the story of the birth of the Lord. By doing this, I hope you can feel yourself beloved, integrated, necessary. I hope you learn to see yourself as God sees you. And I hope that you are humbled by your own beauty. Amen, and Merry Christmas.